Well, Partygate rolls on. At the latest count, 5 MPs have called for Boris Johnson's resignation. They are the Scottish Tory leader, Douglas Ross, Vice Chairman of the 1922 Committee, William Wragg. His decision came when we were on air last night. Sir Roger Gale, Julian Sturdy and Caroline Noakes. We've lost count of the negative front pages. But notably, and I think within the last hour or so, the Spectator, a magazine, as you know, formerly edited by the Prime Minister, and something of a touchstone, a cornerstone of the Tory faithful, has this front page. It's asking, quite simply, pithily, is it over? A less than flattering image for the Prime Minister to ponder on. Well, we'll cover the Scottish Tory revolt in the second hour of the show and speak to one MSP who wants out, or wants Boris out. But here in Westminster, one of the favourites to replace Mr Johnson, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, could give only lukewarm support yesterday and notably absent from the Commons yesterday. So is it nearly over for the Prime Minister? Joined by Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, who's alongside me here in the studio, having had a very busy 48 hours. Does what the Spectators say, or even wonders with a question mark, matter, Tom?
I think it does, but I think it reflects a wider mood. And I was sitting there in the House of Commons yesterday for that seismic Prime Minister's Questions event, where the Prime Minister really had to step up to the mark and had to make a pretty significant intervention into this debate. Of course, he had been silent for the best part of 2 days while this story was rolling on. Well, yesterday we finally heard his side of the story, and for some it's been enough. Of course, 5 Conservative MPs isn't an avalanche, but it is a trickle, and it's a trickle that may be damaging.
Trickle, Tom. It's not a moving trickle, is it? If I'm mixing too many metaphors, so I apologise, but you know, it seems to have stopped at 5.
It seems to have. I mean, let's be real. It started with 1, it moved to 2 over the course of yesterday, and indeed into last night it's trickled, but it seems to have been stemmed for now, and stemmed potentially for one reason, and her name is Sue Gray. Of course, Sue Gray is the civil servant who is compiling the report into all of the alleged events, parties, whatever we want to call them, that occurred across government, or alleged to have occurred across government in the last 2 years. Now, we're expecting to be reporting early next week. One suggestion is that it might come about on Tuesday. Now, that will be a pretty watershed moment. Depending on what Sue Gray's report says, we might well hear more Tory names come out of the woodwork.
Tom, what on earth's going on in Scotland? I mean, this is the Conservative and Unionist Party. We heard Nicola Sturgeon making merry today, ridiculing Scottish Tories, saying, you know, you've not even got the support of your allies at Westminster. It's manna from heaven for her. Is this a lasting breach in the works, do you think?
Well, we need to look at who Douglas Ross is as a politician. He's someone who was originally an MSP, became a Member of Parliament, and indeed, when he stood to be leader of the Scottish Conservative Party around a year ago, he did that off the back of having resigned as a minister under Boris Johnson. Why did he resign? Over the Barnard Castle affair. So he's got form on taking a pretty strong view on alleged breaches, on perceived breaches, or indeed on breaches of COVID rules. This is part of his brand as a politician, but also if we look at the particular unique circumstances of Boris Johnson in Scotland, he is less well respected in that part of the country than in other parts of the country. And indeed, Ruth Davidson, the former leader of the Scottish Conservatives, had some pretty blunt words to say on social media and indeed in the House of Lords about Boris Johnson. Douglas Ross is seen in some respects as her protégé. For him to not go as far as Ruth Davidson would be tricky. And then, of course, once the leader of the Scottish Conservatives has said something, it's very hard for the MSPs, the Scottish Conservative MSPs, to not then fall in line. So subsequently, we saw, one by one, every single Tory Scottish MSP fall in line behind Douglas Ross.
Because they have to. It's that sort of inevitable chain reaction, isn't it? Tom, thanks very much indeed. Cheers.